Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so this is it. The 1290 days. US Saudi peace. Okay, very important. So let's talk about it. Okay, first I'm going to kind of go over the history, um what has brought us to where we are now, and then we'll get into the 1290 days. So if you want to skip ahead to the 1290 days, look for the slide that says, let's see, key dates page 10, I think is what it's on, or 11 or 12 or something like that. So you could skip ahead. But I want to show you how we've been fulfilling history, or been fulfilling Bible prophecy with the stuff that's been going on in the world. And that a lot of the key dates and numbers that we find in prophecy have been fulfilled. Um, um, I mean, I don't want to say like they're done being fulfilled, because it seems like a lot of times God reuses, like, especially some of the numbers get reused different ways. So, so let's talk about where we've been. Okay, so this is Daniel's. This is a picture that I drew of Daniel's statue, and that comes from the book of Daniel, from Daniel 2, the second chapter of Daniel. And so it talks about like these different kingdoms, and one of the kingdoms like silver, and the other kingdom is bronze, and then there's legs of iron in this statue. So you could go read in chapter 2 to find out the description of the statue. And so what I have done is I put, and it's got a head of gold, this statue. And so what I've done is put Netanyahu as the head of gold, because I kind of think gold connects to the Jewish people. And then we got Bush and Reagan on the silver part of the statue, because I think silver connects to like the Christians and America. And then we got Obama and the Clintons and Joe Biden in the bronze part of it. Because I think, is it bronze that kind of connects to like stiff neck or something like that. And then I got Trump and BLM are like the legs of iron. And so what I'm thinking is like the legs of iron was like the time frame, like the statue actually kind of shows the time frame. And so what we're seeing is we had Obama, and then it started this division in America, well, and probably around the world too, of the people, um, um, that, people blame Trump a lot on causing division, but I really think it started with Obama. And so it's like he's the belly, and then we start dividing into these two legs, the right versus left. Okay. And so then um, during Trump's presidency, like he was one of the legs of iron, but then BLM, the protests, they were like, so iron kind of connects to, like, let's see, I thought I had a verse that connects to, okay. Daniel 2:40 says, the fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So iron is kind of connected to like war, destruction. So I was thinking maybe during the time of Trump that the two legs would have been like Trump and BLM. And then now I believe we're at the feet. Okay. And so what I think the two sides of the feet are, you have like Joe Biden and MAGA. Joe Biden's on one side, the left, and then MAGA on the right. Because just as Trump had to deal with the BLM rioters during his presidency, now Joe Biden's having to deal with these crazy MAGA people. Um, and so that's where I think we're at. And so I think the statue connects to um, um, Revelation 17, where it says, "Here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." Okay, so this is the chapter. Revelation 17 is the chapter that talks about Babylon and the woman riding a beast. Okay, and um, it talks about the woman sitting on like these 7 heads. And so I think that connects, like, if the woman is Biden, um, like as Biden being the head of America, which would be like the woman. Um, so I think the 7 heads connect to the G7, that America is a part of the 7 countries of G7. But then the verse goes on to say it also connects to the 7 kings. Okay, and so I think that connects to the presidents in America that connect to the statue. And it says 5 have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. So I tried to kind of do a color connection here. So 5 have fallen could be Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. They're done with their presidencies, or you could say the 5th has fallen, which would be Obama. He's no longer president. And then it says 1 is, okay, and so that's in the context of these verses, which is talking about Babylon. And so I think that connects to Trump. I mean, kind of like Trump's never really gone away, even though he has, lost the power that he had when he was president, but he hasn't really gone away. And then it says the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. And so that's a little while, I think, connects to Biden. I don't think he's going to be around very, like, for his whole full term. And then it says the beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th and is of the 7, and he goes to destruction. So what I believe is that Obama was the 5th king, Trump was the 6th king, Biden is the 7th king, and so now we're waiting for the 8th king to return. And the 8th king, it says it comes out of the 7. Okay, and I really think that's Trump returning. I'm pretty convinced of that. I mean, it could be Obama, but I doubt it. I really think Trump's coming back. And then, so like I said, in Daniel 2:39, it talks about the kingdom of bronze. Oh, let's see. Did I get that right? Okay, so the kingdom of bronze, which I connect to Obama and the Clintons and Biden, it says the 3rd kingdom of bronze will rule over all the earth. And so we really saw that during the time of Obama, that he was really starting to put together kind of this one world system, working with all the countries, trying to make deals with them, G7. And they were really bummed when Obama was done with his presidency. And then Trump came in and undid a bunch of the stuff that Obama did. And then, like I said, the 4th kingdom is as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So that kind of describes Trump. When he first came, he shattered a bunch of the stuff that Obama tried to build. But then I think in the last days, he's going to cause great destruction. And so then when it talks about the statue, it says the head of that statue was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. So a lot of times in Daniel, we'll hear the prophecy, and then some angel will come and give an interpretation. So at the later in the chapter, it talks about the interpretation. So the interpretation says, in that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, some of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. So if I really have the timing with the statue right, it means that after the feet comes this stone that gets cut out of the mountain, which I definitely believe is Messiah. Okay. And so that's why I think we're in this time frame. I think we're really close to the end of the statue, and then we're going to have the kingdom of Messiah, of Jesus, that will endure forever. Okay, and so when it talks about the toes, I think I think verse 40, like, okay, so verse 41, it says, "In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay." I actually think verse 41 might connect to the time of Trump, and that the potter's clay connects to like the Christians, and then you have the iron part of the feet and toes. I think that connects to like Trump's followers, the MAGA followers. Like, okay, so we got the wheat and the tares, and the wheat would be God's people, and the tares would be well, what I think is they're Trump's followers. Okay, they're not part of God's kingdom. Okay, and so they're really making Trump their Messiah rather than Jesus. Okay. But then it goes on, verse 42, which actually might connect to the time of Biden, because you have like 42 is divisible by 7, and he's the 7th king. And so it says, as the toes of the feet were, so now it's like talking about the toes. Okay, we're partly of iron and partly of pottery. Some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. So I kind of think that what we're describing is during the time of Biden, you're going to have these like two groups of people that don't mix together, would be, Joe Biden and his followers not mix, and then Trump and the MAGA people not mixing with Biden's people. Okay. Now, one of the things I wrote is 10 plus 2. Okay. Because I think what you have is the toes connect to 10, and then the 2 feet connect to 2. Okay. So the numbers 10 and 2 remind us of the spies in the wilderness. So there was 2 that had faith and 10 that didn't have faith. Okay. And so I think the 2 that have faith connects to Jesus followers. Okay. So the iron, I think, definitely connects to Trump and his followers. Now, what's interesting is pottery, or it talks about the common clay, in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay. Sometimes it's translated miry clay, which is wet clay. And so that actually could connect to Joe Biden, because I think he's the beast from the sea. And, so the iron is not mixing with this wet clay. Okay. So, but there's a little of, it says they will combine with one another in the seed of men. Like, I believe that during the time of Biden, they're still sort of combining, with him being the leader, but there's definitely this division, happening during the time of Biden. Okay. So that's what I think is where we're at. And so then let's talk about the dates. So I have a lot of key dates, and because I want to show how we've been fulfilling a lot of the prophecies. Okay. So we had the time of Obama was 2009 to 2017. On July 14th, 2015, that was when Obama did his Iran deal. And that exact same day was when those Planned Parenthood videos were revealed that shows that Planned Parenthood was like selling baby parts. It was really gross. And so that happened on July 14th, 2015. I don't remember if there was other stuff during the time of Obama, that would be helpful to list on this, some of his big sins. I mean, besides just in general, I see a lot of parallels. Like, when he was campaigning, they made it seem like he was a Christian, but then, he pushed for gay marriage, and I mean, that would be a good date to write down when that happened. And then we had the same thing happen with Trump too, that they, tried to make it seem like he was a Christian when he was running, but his behavior really hasn't lived that out. I mean, he's willing to work with the evangelicals because he just likes having followers, but I don't really think he's one of them. Especially because I had heard, like he won't specifically speak out against abortion like someone who follows, God would really do. Um, um, anyways, so Trump's inauguration was January 20th, 2017. On December 6th, 2017 was when he made his announcement about moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Okay, the American embassy moving it to Jerusalem because I think it was in Tel Aviv at the time. And what's interesting about that date, December 6th, it connects to, it's 12/6, and it connects to like 666 or the 1260 days. There was a, Trump tends to be connected to the number 6. Um, um, so that was significant. And then on May 14, 2018 was when, the embassy did get moved, and that was on the 70th year of Israel. So it's interesting because in the book of Daniel's looking at the prophecies and says, okay, it talks about 70 years and it's been 70 years. So, so Daniel actually said a prayer of repentance, and is kind of like, okay, what's up, God? And then God sends him an angel to say, well, it's 70 years, but then there's 70 weeks and a few other time frames, and we'll talk about that later. But we've got the 70th year done. Okay. And I really think with Trump moving the embassy, I think he's doing a lot of false signs. I think it all has to do with this testing to see who we're going to follow. Are we going to wait and follow Jesus, or are we going to follow Trump, thinking that he's like a Messiah-like figure, or that he's the one sent by God to save America? So I think it's a lot of this testing, these signs, and peace, quote unquote, peace deals that Trump had done to just, test us to see who we're going to follow. Okay. Well, so then the biggest thing that happened was President Trump's quote unquote deal of the century. That happened on January 28, 2020. And the reason why I say that's a big deal is because 7 weeks after the deal of the century was, well, the 50th state with COVID on 3/17. I mean, it really ushered in COVID. Okay. COVID was God's judgment for Trump's deal of the century. And if you understand that Trump was really trying to divide the land, okay, trying to do a two-state type solution with the Palestinians, you could see why God was angry. And I talked about this stuff like a long time ago in my videos if you want to go back. But it got a lot more clear as time went on. We could look at these dates and go, oh yeah, God's definitely mad because the shutdown for COVID came 7 weeks after the deal of the century. Okay. And then 119 and 120 days after the deal of the century was the start of the BLM rioting. Okay. And so I thought that was interesting because you got that 119 date, which looks like 9/11. Okay. 9/11 just shows up a lot everywhere. And I really think it's kind of a picture of like the Civil War in America, or the division in America. And then George Floyd's death there's the 9 minutes, 29 seconds. You could take the 29 seconds and make that 11. So there's a 9/11 connected to George Floyd's death, so definitely a 9/11 picture there. Okay. I mean, besides seeing what happened, I mean, there was definitely a big division in America. Um, and then I'm still trying to figure this out, but 190 days after the deal of the century um, which was the 71st day of writing, was the explosion in Lebanon on August 4th. Okay. And I really felt like at that time we entered into a fiery furnace type time frame. Because there was the explosion in Lebanon, the fires in America were really blowing up. And what was interesting too is that August 4th in 2020, that's Obama's birthday, so that was kind of interesting. What's interesting now is that Lebanon's kind of back in the picture with Israel, with the fact that there's tensions on the northern border in Israel with Lebanon right now. So that's kind of interesting, and it's happening in August, which is interesting. Um, um, and just, I didn't mention the Lion's Den, but I felt like the BLM writing could be a Lion's Den type time frame. So that was what was going on there. And then we saw 2020 was like the year of the two witnesses. 2020 connects to your eyes, so like the year of the two witnesses. And then we saw 5 of the 6 quote unquote peace deals that Trump did. I mean, depending on how you count them, happening in 2020, with the final one happening in February of 2021. It's interesting because I mean, no one really talks about Trump's deal of the century anymore. And what's interesting is Netanyahu talks about 4 peace deals. So, and both, Trump and Netanyahu were both kind of a part of these peace deals. So it's interesting that Netanyahu only talks about 4 peace deals now. So I don't know which one he considers didn't really take or something. I don't know. So, and then what was interesting in the middle of all that is that on September 15th, Trump had these peace deal signings in Washington. He had 2 of the countries, I mean, it might have been UAE and Bahrain in Washington signing papers. And that was interesting because it was the 33rd week. I don't know if that could be like the 33rd week after the deal of the century, but it was the 13th, 35th day of Trump's presidency, counting from his inauguration, I think, or maybe when he got voted in. But anyways, we see that 1335th number connected to Trump there. So very interesting. And so I kind of think that's important to know to maybe understand like the true fulfillment of 1335. And so I wrote, Jeremiah 6:1 says, they have healed the brokenness of my people superficially, saying peace, peace, but there is no peace. Okay. And so, I mean, everyone does say that about Trump. Like, Trump brought peace to the Middle East. And, but if you look at, I mean, right around the time when he was signing all these peace deals with these countries, there was hurricanes hitting or winter storms. And so there definitely wasn't peace with God. But it, definitely like September 15th, when they were doing the peace deal signings in Washington, the Palestinians were doing a day of raid. So it definitely didn't create peace with the Palestinians, these peace deals. It actually made things worse with the Palestinians. So that's what's going on. And so it's helpful to know that if you're going, that these presidents, when they set up these quote unquote peace deals, that God brings judgment. Okay. It's helpful to know that. And we could see that by looking at history. Okay. Like Hurricane Katrina had a lot to do with whatever George Bush was doing in the Middle East at the time, and then now we could see, some of these hurricanes, like Hurricane Sally, being connected to, the peace deal signings. So definitely important to know. And it has a lot to do with, because Israel is very important to God. He talks about, I don't know if I put that verse in there, but he talks about whoever touches Israel touches the apple of his eye. Okay. Um, so then after 2020, well, the end of 2020 was when we had November 7th. And what was interesting about November 7th is that was 9 months, 11 days after the deal of the century. Okay, so see that 9/11 number there? And that was when Biden was declared the winner after the election on November 3rd. Okay. And I think that's interesting because it connects to Revelation 11:7, which I have on a later slide. So I'm starting to see that sometimes these dates even connect to the verse numbers in scripture. So very fascinating. On January 6th was when the Capitol riot happened. So I highlighted 6 because remember I said 6 connects to Trump. And then what was interesting is that was also the day of Epiphany. And so really, hopefully, a lot of people had an epiphany about Trump, that he was maybe not so great during, when they saw the consequences of his speech, his fiery speech. And just how he's like really stirring up the crazies in this country, and kind of building his army, really. And I mean, I kind of had an epiphany earlier, and I don't remember. I think the deal of the century might have been the big thing that got my attention, and just seeing the effects of it in Israel and how it really wasn't that great for the people on the ground in Israel. But hopefully, a lot of people had an epiphany on January 6th. What was interesting too is that was Tebet 22 on the Hebrew calendar. So there's a connection to the number 8. Okay, so 22, the way the Jewish festivals go is that they're the 15th through the 21st is 7 days, and then the 22nd would be like the 8th day of the festival if it goes that long. So 22 is a number that connects to 8. Okay, so it's very interesting that we saw on that date both the number 6 and the number 8. Okay, so I'm looking up, I wrote down Psalm 105, and I don't remember what that connects to, so let me read it and see why I wrote that. 105:30 says, okay, their land swarmed with frogs, even in the chambers of their kings. Okay, so definitely we saw that the Capitol rioters, they went into the inner chambers. Okay, like the inner sanctum, the holy place. Okay, and just defamed it. So definitely interesting. What was very interesting is because of the riot on January 6th, the electoral college vote didn't happen until January 7th. And so what was fascinating about that is that January 7th was 62 days after 11/7. And it was also Orthodox Christmas. So what was interesting about that is that connects to, in Daniel 5, we read about Darius the Mede receiving the kingdom at about the age of 62. Okay, so 62 days after they declared Biden the winner was when he received the kingdom. Okay. That was 11 months, 11 days after the deal of the century. So then on January 8th, so I highlighted that 8 number there, okay? Trump was permanently suspended from Twitter. I think Elon Musk put him back on there recently. But well, it was interesting that Trump had 88 million followers. So there's that 8 number there again. Okay. So very interesting. So then what I kind of think, then we moved into 2021, and I think 2021 was the year of the 7th king, Biden. Okay. Because that number 21 is 7 times 3. Okay. So I think that connects to the year of the 7th king. And I mean, not that too much really happened in 2021, but it was just kind of moving from Trump and Netanyahu's power and time in the spotlight into, that Biden was then, getting power. Okay. Um, and then so 120 days after the peace signings of 9/15 was Trump's second impeachment vote. Okay. Very interesting because we see 120 in connected to the story of the flood. And God says, because man is sinful, I'm only going to give him 120 years. So definitely interesting. What also is interesting too is that from 8/13, which was the first peace thing. Okay, I'll go over here. Peace deal with UAE on 8/13, or well, the second one if you're counting the DOC. From 8/13 to 2/8/2021 was 180 days. Okay, so we read in Esther 1 about this 180-day banquet. Okay, and then what's interesting, then Esther 1 goes on to talk about a 7-day banquet. So the 180th day banquet would connect to Trump, which 180, that number 18 is like 666. So definitely very interesting. So that was what was going on. And then the 70th week after the deal of the century, quote unquote, was when, okay, so the 70th week, on the second day of that week, was when the Israeli opposition party struck a coalition deal and Netanyahu was out. Okay, so it was interesting because that was on June 2nd in 2021. Okay, so we see that 62 number there. Okay, Darius the Mede gets the kingdom at 62. Okay, and then a couple days later, the 4th day of the 70th week was when Trump was kicked off of Facebook for 2 years and no Instagram too. Okay, so that I believe is the fulfillment of the 70 weeks. Okay. Then on July 13th, so we actually didn't know about this until in August, but there was a cable that was sent out urging, I mean, this was, the first year of Biden, kind of the big thing that he did was made a mess in Afghanistan. Okay. And so actually on July 13th, there was a cable where, and I don't know who wrote the cable, but it was someone urging that the Biden administration, I believe, evacuate the Afghan allies. Okay, and the reason why that was brought up is because it didn't, I don't think it happened, and it seems like that happens a lot when some of the warnings, when we know things are going to be bad, I don't know, people dilly-dally and they don't really get out the American citizens or the American allies in a timely fashion. And so it just ended up being a mess in Afghanistan. Okay, what was interesting about that, so the cable happened 11 months after the UAE deal. Then on August 11th, so I put that date down because on August 11, 2020 was when Biden picked Harris as his vice president. Okay. And the reason why I put that down is because I'm really looking at August 11th tomorrow as a potentially important date. Okay. And what was interesting in 2021 is that on August 11th, it was 119 degrees in Sicily. Okay, now that probably seems like, what's the big deal? But back then, that really broke a record. Okay, they never seen such a high temperature in Europe. Okay, so that was in Italy. So we see that 9/11 number there. So maybe an early warning sign. Um, I mean, some of these things, once again, we might have to wait and see what happens in the future to really see maybe what God was trying to say to us. Okay. But then on August 15th was when the um, the town of Kabul fell to the Taliban. Okay. Um, and what was interesting about that is that was 11 months after the peace signings. Okay, so that was kind of interesting. And then it kind of connects to the story of Jeroboam's feast in the scriptures, because it happened on the 15th day of the 8th month. And really what it is Jeroboam is this guy that kind of sets up his own kind of kingdom to try to get people away from the true worship of God. Okay. And that was when Israel divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Um, so definitely fascinating. Okay. Um, so then moving on, I think 2020 could be the year of revealing the lawless one. Okay. Um, and I put lawless one and then I put an S there because I think there's so many lawless ones floating around. I think ultimately Trump's the lawless one. But there's so many others. And the thing is, we read in the story, there's a lot of twin stories in the scripture, like birth stories. Okay. And we see Jesus on the cross with two thieves. Okay. So there is just a lot of lawless ones in the last days. Okay. Um, and so on February 24th was when, in 2022, was when the war started. So Biden definitely is a lawless type person. Okay. Um, I mean, did I say Biden? I mean Putin. Sorry. Putin, trying to invade Ukraine, trying to get extra land for himself. Um, so that was on February 24th. On June 9th, was when the January 6th Commission started on primetime TV. Um, and so that's another opportunity that people could have had an epiphany, was to watch those and really see kind of the lawless behavior of Trump. Because they really brought out some very interesting evidence of Trump's behavior when he was president and related to the January 6th events and then related to the election. Okay. Well, the other thing that happened on June 9th was, okay, so the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, its leader or president or whatever it is, Grossi, on that date, he said in 3 to 4 weeks they won't be able to verify Iran's nuclear progress. So that is all interesting when you understand that um, that Obama's like Iran deal really didn't do that good job of keeping Iran in check, but it even got worse when like Trump kicked like dropped out of the Iran deal, because then Iran could blame its failings on like Trump and America dropping out of the plan. But the the atomic agency was they were like kind of keeping track of what was going on with Iran's nuclear program, and they had cameras, but then Iran like kicked out the cameras, and and they didn't let them come in and inspect. So it really became a dangerous time in the world because no one was keeping an eye on what Iran was doing in terms of nuclear weapons and things like that. So that happened on June 9th. On June 24th was when Roe v. Wade was overturned. It was interesting. The vote was 4 versus 5. So I kind of connect that to the story of 4 kings versus 5. What's interesting about the date, let's see. So 24 connects to 6 times 4. So it's like 6666. Okay. And So, I mean, there is kind of this connection of like, they think because Trump appointed some conservatives into the Supreme Court, that, now some of the votes are more on the conservative side or whatever. Um, so, but what was interesting is that then on that day, um, there was a women's march calling for a summer of rage because of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So we definitely saw lawless ones connecting to the pro-abortionist, um, coming out at that time. It was also June 24th was also 1 year after Surfside. Okay. Um, that was um, um, that building that collapsed in Florida. Okay, there was so many 9/11 overtones. Okay, what was interesting is that um, it was connected to Biden's infrastructure bill. So um, so God was definitely sending a message to Biden. Okay, um, so that was interesting. Um, okay, so then on July 14th in 2022, Um, this was when Biden signed a paper with Lapid was the current um, um, prime minister of, or like he might have been um, interim prime minister at that time of Israel. Okay, because Netanyahu was out, and then they were bringing in some of these people on the left, um, and so they signed this paper, and it was definitely like talking about like two-state, just not really a good, I mean, it really revealed what Biden was like and his how he relates to Israel and what Lapid was like. So that happened 21 days after Roe v. Wade was overturned. um, what's interesting about the July 14th date is that 777, and then the 21 day is 777. It was 7 years after Obama's JCPOA, his Iran deal. Okay. Um, so, and then it was 1 year after the 9/11 Surfside calls were um, um, released. Okay. So definitely interesting. Um, and then, so what I did is I listed these 3 dates of what happened after Biden signed this paper, because I think that was like judgment for Biden signing this paper was like on 8 days later, on July 21st, Biden had COVID. Um, and then we see that was on the 8th day, Tammuz 22. So maybe a message God was sending to Biden about the eighth king, July 23rd was when monkeypox was declared a global emergency. That happened on the 10th day. Um, so some kind of similarities to, Trump with his deal of the century. On July 28th was when the U.S. entered a recession, um, enters recession. Okay, so that was 2 weeks later. Okay. Um, so definitely if you wonder what God thought about this paper that Biden signed. So then what was interesting on August 5th to the 7th in 2022 was when they had Operation Breaking Dawn in Israel. Israel always kind of has these interesting names for their wars. Okay. Um, they were fighting with Gaza. I think it was Gaza. Um, and what was interesting is that Tisha B'Av, which is like kind of like 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar, because Av is the 11th month, and then Tisha would be the 9th day on the 11th month. Okay, so that day was on August 6th in 2022. Okay. So a lot of bad things happen, throughout history. It happened to the Jewish people on August 6th. So, um, so it was kind of interesting. It was almost like they preempted, like they started the war or whatever. Well, I mean, as much as you could say they started the war, because I'm sure there was some I'm sure they were provoked. Um, so that happened on then, and then on August 8th was when last year was when they had the Mar-a-Lago search. Okay, 11 sets of classified info were seized. Okay, what was interesting is that was the 11th month, the 11th day on the 11th month. Okay, and then so I think it was interesting that happened on August 8th because we see 8-8, there. So definitely interesting. Um, so then September 11th, 2022 was the 21st year after 9/11. This year on September 11th, it's going to be the 22nd year. Okay. So if 21 is kind of a important number connected to Biden, um, because of him being the seventh king, it's possible that we would see something happen before September 11th of this year when we switch over to the 22nd year. But I'm not really sure. But then 22 connects to the eighth king, so I'm not really sure. But maybe on September 11th we switch over to the eighth king. I'm not sure. Okay. Um, we'll just have to see how that works out. On October 27th, another big thing that happened was the U.S. brokered maritime agreement between Israel and Lebanon. So what was really interesting, so this was a deal about the sea land, the sea area, um, on the coast between Israel and Lebanon. And they ended up giving really a bunch of Israel's sea land to Lebanon. And I mean, it's, they think there's gas there and they're drilling for gas, maybe natural gas. I don't know which gas. But Israel lost some of its profits given the land of Lebanon. Well, what was interesting is that the country of Lebanon really kind of fell after this deal. They're just a mess right now. And so, if you tried to mess with Israel, you get messed up. What was interesting is that was week 15 after July 14th. Okay. Well, so what's interesting to me is the numbers 15 and the number 150 connects to the story of the Great Flood in the story of Noah. Okay. So I think there's a fulfillment of some of those prophecies in the story of Noah connected to Biden, who I think is the beast from the sea. Okay. So I relisted October 27th on this page so that I could list kind of the judgments connected to that. So on November 2nd, day 7 days after this maritime agreement. So Lapid in Israel signed it, and then the guy in Lebanon signed it, and they signed it in their own offices or whatever. Like nobody got together. But it was really, the credit was given to Biden for brokering this agreement. Okay, and then Biden gave some credit to France for this agreement. Okay, so France now, too, ever since they got involved in this agreement, they're having problems over in France. Okay. So, anyway, so if you're wondering why Biden's getting some judgment, it's because, his administration was supposedly involved in this. Okay. And so on November 2nd, that was when they found the documents in his private office. But they covered it up. They didn't tell us at the time. Okay. And then on November 3rd, this was the fastest judgment I've ever seen, is that 8 days after Lapid signed this maritime agreement, he was out. He was conceding to Netanyahu on day 8. So fast judgment. Okay. And what was interesting about November 3rd is that was 2 years after the Trump Biden election. So we read about how Joseph at 2 full years, came into power. Okay. So now what we have is, and that was after Joseph was in jail. And so that could be Netanyahu fulfilling that he was in jail for 2 full years. And, now he's returning to power. On November 7th was when they declared the triple epidemic of the flu, RSV, and COVID. Okay. That was 12 days after the maritime agreement, which was the 2-year anniversary of Biden being declared the winner of that election. Okay. Then on November 15th, so what was fascinating about that is then on November 15th, Trump announced his candidacy. Okay. And also on November 15th too was the 8 billion mark of the population of the world. Okay, so we see that number 8 there. So kind of like God showing us, this, kind of giving us a little sign that, Biden could be on his way out and Trump could be on his way in, even though it's really hard to picture. But then on November 16th, another sign was that was when the Republicans got the control of the House. Okay. After the election that year. Okay. So definitely Biden's dropping in power and, God's slowly giving some control back to the Republicans. Okay. And then on November 18th was when Jack Smith was appointed the special counsel. What's interesting is the 18 number there, 666. December 1st was when, so in Israel, they had their election on November 1st. Let's see, did I write that down anywhere? November 1st. Anyways, they had their election on November 1st, and then because I wrote that Lapid was conceding on day 8. That was after the election on November 1st. But then on December 1st, so the way they do it in Israel is you still have to, even if you win the election, you still have to get a coalition together. And then, so Netanyahu did that on December 1st. Okay. What's interesting about that is it connects to Daniel 12:1. Okay. And so let me see if I can find Daniel. So it's interesting to find these verses that connect to fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, and to me this is we're definitely seeing the fulfillment of this Daniel 12:1. It says, "Now at that time Michael, the great prince who stands over the sons of your people," so the sons would be Israel, okay, the Jewish people in Israel. "At that time Michael will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued." Okay. So definitely ever since Netanyahu got into power, there's been distress in Israel. Okay. So fascinating, huh? And then it's interesting now because now, I see there's a verse that connects to when Biden got in power, a verse that connects to Netanyahu. So I'll have to look and see if I can find the one that connects to Trump when he got into power the first time. But on December 13th, that's when Biden signed his Respect for Marriage Act. Okay. Which, I had to put all these names in quotes because they're so not what they say. Okay. It's not respect for marriage the way that God created it. It's really an LGBT type thing. What was interesting is that it happened on week 150. Okay, so that's another number that comes from the Great Flood story. Okay. Biden, the beast from the sea. Okay. And you could definitely see by the things that Biden did is that he's definitely not a Christian because pro-abortion, pro-LGBT, and actually doing things connected to that. On December 19th was when the January 6th committee made their referrals to the Department of Justice. I thought that was interesting that it happened on week 152. Also, week 150 also, which is like 80 weeks after the 70th week. So that was kind of interesting. And then December 29th was when Netanyahu was actually sworn in for his 6th term. I highlighted 6, which was actually 18 months after his ouster. So we definitely see those 6 numbers. So I guess some of the 6 numbers connect to Netanyahu too. Okay. And so that was like 82 weeks after, he lost his power on the 70th week. Okay. So that leads us to 2023. Okay. So I'm wondering if the 2300, it talks about, in Daniel 8:14, it talks about the 2300 evenings and mornings. And I'm kind of wondering, sometimes I think numbers, besides being literal, are symbolic. And so I'm wondering if that connects to 2023. Okay, so in Daniel 8, we read, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, 'How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled?' He said to me, 'For 2300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored.'" Okay. So with the holy place being trampled and the host, it's like both the countries of Israel and America are being trampled, and God's people in those countries are being trampled. Okay. And so are we going to see the holy place be restored in 2023 is what I'm wondering. Okay. So then on January 3rd, that's when Biden, his administration, did 2 actions to expand access to abortion drugs. That same day was when the Republicans took control of the House. And then on January 9th, which was 7 days after January 3rd, after Biden did this, abortion drug thing, was when the disclosure finally came out about that they found the documents, back in, when did they find the documents? On November 2nd. So definitely think that was fast judgment about connected to the abortion drugs. Okay. What was really kind of weird was on January 3rd to January 7th, we had this weird time frame where they were trying to vote for the Speaker of the House and they couldn't get it done. And it was interesting because it was really another type of January 6th by the MAGA people in terms of like really holding up the government in Washington. Okay. And so then like Trump, I guess, supposedly called, like, I think it was the 14th vote, that he called and, kind of said like, get it done. And so finally the 15th vote, they finally voted for Kevin McCarthy, which ended up being on January 7th. Okay. So kind of a repeat of January 6th, January 7th kind of thing going on. And that happened the 2-year anniversary after January 6th. Okay. What's interesting is they're now in the 118th Congress. So I don't know if that connects to, well, you got the 18, which connects to 666, but I'm also wondering, is that a picture of 8/11, like, which is tomorrow, so I'm not sure, but I thought that was interesting. So April 4th was Trump's first indictment, 34 counts in New York. That happened on Nissan 13. On April 21st, Biden signed his environmental justice bill. The Supreme Court decided, the Supreme Court said it was going to decide the abortion pill issue. What was interesting about that is that happened on the 9th month, the 29th day after Roe v. Wade overturned. And so I actually don't know what happened with that. Like, I mean, they probably overturned it or whatever. I don't know. So, but it was interesting because you have kind of that 9/11 number showing up. May 9th to May 13th was 5 days of Operation Shield and Arrow in Israel, which started on Lag Baomer. So that was happening in Israel. On June 13th was Trump's second indictment. Kind of interesting that that number 13 keeps showing up. Did I get that date right? So yeah, because I think, yeah, because that was the second 13 number. Which I always connected the number 13 to Obama, so it's kind of interesting that it's showing up in his indictments. And so that was in Miami, Florida. There was 37 criminal charges, and I can't remember why, like, it was sort of divided 31 plus 6 criminal charges. So that was kind of interesting. What was interesting about that, it was the day before Trump's 77th birthday. So happy birthday, Trump. So kind of interesting. So then on June 30th, that was when the Supreme Court overturned Biden's college loan forgiveness. Okay. So what was interesting about that is that it's the date, the 30th is 6 times 5. When, so I'm going back here to when, I'm going to be able to find it, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, it was 6 times 4, and then now we're at 6 times 5. Okay. Don't really know what it means, but it's interesting. I mean, like I said, maybe a kind of a connection to, because, Trump appointed these, Supreme Court judges. So, when the Supreme Court decided to stand with the Christian web designer, I mean, kind of good news. And then it was interesting that day on June 30th was the start of the heat wave in Phoenix, which went for, it went for a while. At least 30 days or something like that. I should look at that more closely because, that could be a type of fiery furnace too. That was when the heat wave really started in America. So, and all throughout the month of July. So then July 3rd to 4th was 2 days of fighting in Jenin, Israel. They have terrorists kind of like setting up shop in Jenin, so they were going after them on July 3rd to 4th. A lot of interesting connections. July 3rd is, when Back to the Future was released. July 4th is Independence Day in America. On July 9th was when Netanyahu and his Security Council decided that they were going to fix, quote unquote, fix the Palestinian Authority. So, if you read the first 5 books of the Bible, God really talks about not mixing and mingling with the people in the land, and so Israel always gets in trouble if they try to get too involved with the Palestinians, okay? And especially don't give them money, it's just a lot of stuff that doesn't work. And so for whatever reason, I mean, usually that happens with the people on the left. They want to give the Palestinians money and help them out and stuff. But for whatever reason, Netanyahu's trying to adopt that behavior. I don't know if he thinks if he fixed the PA, he could keep the terrorist out of Jenin. I don't know. But if you want to know what God thought about that behavior, 2 weeks later, on July 23rd, Netanyahu was in the hospital getting a pacemaker. Okay? So, definitely interesting. It was interesting that it was connected to the 23rd number. That's very interesting. Um, so then on July 11th, um, was okay, okay, very interesting. That was when NATO had their Vilnius summits. Okay. You got to be careful if you're on a summit, you might fall off. Okay. What was very interesting about that day is it's day 1260 after the deal of the century. Okay. And that was the day that we saw the first, in Israel, they had the first reading of the reasonableness, quote unquote, bill in Israel. Okay, so that was something that Netanyahu was trying to push through. Um, and so in Israel, they always have like 3 readings or votes on these bills before they can get passed. Um, and so that was the first one. And then there was a day of disruption. So the people on the left weren't happy and started this day of disruption in Israel. And it really is what it says. It was disrupting traffic and stuff like that. So that is interesting that was 1260. So then on July 14th, again, that was when Biden announced his student debt relief, even though, the Supreme Court ruled against it. Okay, they overturned it. Okay, he's still trying to give student debt relief. Okay, so I thought it was interesting because July 14th, um, a year ago, July 14th in 2022 was when we had 777. But then now you could actually take 2023 and it adds up to 7 and you get 4 sevens. Okay, so I don't know if this is like showing kind of the fullness of sins. The more sevens, the more full you are, with your sins, the more complete. I don't know. But that July 14th was 8 years after the JCPOA, and it was 1 year after Biden signed his paper with Lapid. Okay. On July 24th was the reasonableness bill in Israel. It was the second and the third readings. Okay, what was interesting about that, it was 9 months, 29 days from Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so lots of protests in Israel. So the deal with the reasonableness bill, I don't totally understand it, but it was like the Supreme Court in Israel, they were like given the power to like overturn some of the stuff that the prime minister and his government did by just saying it's not reasonable. And so it was kind of this obscure language kind of thing. And so Netanyahu, like, they're trying to, do judicial reform in their country because, they think it's bad. But they're really like ramming it through, despite all these objections and all these protests. Okay. And the thing about it is that it's just causing civil war, division in Israel. And, Netanyahu really should just let it go. But he's really just like ramming it through. Okay. What's interesting about the 24th date is that you have 6666 with that date. Okay. Like surrounded by 2 sevens. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, so I don't know if we're seeing like the fullness of sins. Biden's got his 777, and then Netanyahu's now got his 6666. On July 25th, it's interesting because that was Christmas in July. The Back to the Future cast had a reunion in Broadway. So I definitely think God's sending us some messages with Christmas and stuff. On July 26th, Hunter Biden had his plea deal rejected by a judge, and so then he ended up pleading not guilty to 2 tax crimes. So that was very interesting. What was interesting about that is that it happened 12 months, 13 days after July 14th of last year, 2022. So definitely some interesting stuff going on there. And then it was interesting because on the next day, July 27th, was when Trump's lawyers met with the DOJ and there was new charges in Trump's document case. They revealed that Trump was trying to hide security footage. What was very interesting about July 27th is that it was Tisha B'Av. So that's the ninth day on the 11th month on the Hebrew calendar. So I was really expecting something to happen there. But I think what God is showing us is that kind of like these charges and these indictments, are connected to, the 9/11 or the 11/9. What was interesting about July 27th is that that's 7/27, okay? So I connect that to an airplane. And so I kind of think with 9/11, it's like, okay, we're at the part in 9/11 where the airplanes have hit, and then now we're just waiting for the towers to fall, okay? So we're really moving along with the prophetical calendar, big time. So then, let's see. I don't know why I repeated this July 27th date. Because I wanted to talk about Tisha B'Av. That the Jewish people actually read Jeremiah 9/11. I mean, they read a bunch of stuff on Tisha B'Av, but they read that particular verse, and so I thought I would cover it. It says, verse 11 says, "I will make Jerusalem a heap of rooms, a haunt of jackals, and I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant." Okay. So I'm wondering if Jerusalem could be a picture of America prophetically. And so, is America going to be a heap of ruins, a haunted jackals? So I'm wondering if that's like the lion's den connection in America. And then in the cities of Judah could connect to Israel. And it says, "I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant." That could connect to the fiery furnace story in Daniel. Those are both Daniel 3 and Daniel 6. But also, when it talks about the cities of Judah, that could also connect to when, in the Bible, when Israel had kind of like its civil war and its division, it broke into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and the Jewish people, the tribe of Judah, was part of the southern kingdom, along with, I think it was the tribe of Levite and maybe the tribe of Dan. Can't remember the other tribe, but so they were part of the southern kingdom, and they were actually the true rulers, okay? Because then I told you that one guy, Jeroboam, set up his own kind of kingdom in the northern kingdom, and his own bulls, and his kind of his own religion, and his own government. And so really, when you talk about the cities of Judah, that could also prophetically be talking about the person who has is the rightful owner of the power. Okay, so that actually could be talking about Biden. So I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. Okay. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Okay, so we're up to this month. August 1st, 2023 was Trump's 45-page indictment for 4 counts by Jack Smith. That was on Ob 14th, so that's interesting. Like, we're moving from the 13th to the 14th. So what is God trying to say? On August 3rd was, so the actual indictment, Trump's arraignment in D.C., so that was Ob 16. Okay, with that 16 number, you got the 8-8. Okay. So definitely could be a sign of like, these indictments actually could lead to Trump returning to power. Okay. But it was interesting, on August 3rd was when the Back to the Future musical opened on Broadway. Okay. So I think that's kind of interesting. Well, I have some pictures from Back to the Future um, coming up. And then August 5th to 6th, 2023, they had peace talks in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Okay. They were actually talking about, oh, peace in quotes. Okay. They were actually trying to solve the Russia Ukraine problem. Okay. It was all these leaders of the world going meeting in Jeddah. But they actually said like these peace talks in Jeddah were kind of like the foundation, or I forget how they worded it, but somehow, helping the peace deal with um, America and Saudi Arabia and Israel. So, um, so kind of like they were starting to talk about that in Jeddah. On August 8th was when Judge Tanya S. Chukan schedules hearing for Friday to discuss the protective order proposals. Okay. And then, so what was interesting about that date is that was 1 year after the Mar-a-Lago search. Okay. And so we have that number 88 there. So, definitely kind of interesting. What's interesting too is that it's happening on Friday, the 11th, but it's in like the courtroom 9, so we see kind of those 9/11 numbers. So definitely very interesting. What I kind of think is like, they're talking about protective order. They don't want Trump to be able to talk about stuff. And I think it's going to be interesting if they're going to try to put Trump under a type of gag order, a type of protective order, because we'll see how well that works. But that could be the thing that causes everything to kind of just explode. Especially like the followers of Trump, I think they will be upset that they can't hear Trump anymore. So that's kind of interesting. What else was sad was that fires in Maui. On August 8th they were saying it killed 6 people, but then today they're saying like more people were killed, and so it's just the fires were destroying the coastal city of Lahaina, and I really think what that connects to is what happens on August 9th. And so now we're having judgment that actually happens before the event even occurs. Okay, is what I think. And so I think what's happening in Maui is judgment for so on August 9th, which is 1290 days after the deal of the century. Okay. Which is when the Wall Street Journal announced that U.S. and Saudi Arabia are have this peace deal thing that's happening. Okay. Like the framework. Okay, they're still talking about it's going to take like 6 to 9 months to hammer it out, or 9 to 12. I can't remember the time frame. Maybe 9 to 12 months to really hammer it out. But I guess they just got really close to like agreeing to do it, that it was announced on August 9th. Okay. But it's not surprising to me because I was really waiting. Like, I knew August 9th was 1290, so I was like, okay, let's wait and see what happens. And so I wasn't surprised to see that. Okay. What's interesting about 1290 is that you have 3 times 4 plus 3 times 3. So you have 7 3s. Like if you take 12, it's 3 times 4, and then 9 is 3 times 3. So 7 3s. Is that how it works? So that's kind of interesting. But you also have that 12-9 number, which I think is really so that to me connects to Okay, so I got to look here. That connects to Revelation 12:9. That 1290 number. And so Revelation 12:9 says, okay, and the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So it connects to Biden, okay, because the great dragon being thrown down is that, I mean, it talks about the war in heaven. And then Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon, then the dragon and his angels wage war. And so when you first read it, it's really the first fulfillment is talking about Biden coming into power. But then I think there could be a second fulfillment where there's another war in heaven where Michael and his angels wage war with the dragon and the great dragon is thrown down, that could actually be a picture of Biden, getting killed, in his fight with Trump and his followers. Okay. So that 1290 number is, just kind of interesting. Like maybe you don't want to be connected to that number. Okay. And then, so that happened on August 9th. Okay. What was very interesting too on that day was there was a man who talked about assassinating Biden on social media. He ended up getting killed when they came to arrest him in Utah, because they wanted to deal with him before Biden came to Utah. So could be interesting. So let's find out more about the 1290 days. Where does that come from? That comes from Daniel 12:9. Okay. And so Daniel and then look at Daniel 12:9 too, because that connects to 1290, so that's interesting. Daniel 12:9 says, go your way. Okay, so it actually says, I'm gonna not read the words that they add to try to make it sound better, because I think we might be missing what God's trying to say, because it says, go Daniel, for words are concealed and sealed up until the end time. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1290 days. How blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. But as for you, go to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise for your allotted portion at the end of the age. So, we see in part, so sometimes it's kind of hard to tell how these prophecies are going to be fulfilled. But I kind of think like in Daniel 12:9, where it says, go Daniel, for words are concealed and sealed up until the end time. That could be like God talking to Biden saying, go, because I think the words that are concealed and sealed up connects to Messiah. Okay, Messiah is the word. And so that's kind of like, okay, go Daniel, go Biden, because then now we need to have the Messiah come. Okay. And so then it says, from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished, so that could be the deal of the century, and the abomination of desolation is set up, that could be Biden's peace deal with Saudi Arabia. There would be 1290 days. Okay. I don't totally understand how Trump's deal of the century abolished the regular sacrifice, except for the fact that maybe that had to do with up until that point. I mean, probably up until Obama, like there was more people in America that were willing to stand with Israel, like willing to make sacrifices for the sake of Israel. But then with Trump's deal of the century, it was like, that, like Trump and his followers, all of a sudden now we have these group of people that, aren't really willing to stand with Israel. And then it's interesting that it says the abomination of desolation is set up, because they talk about this peace deal like it's the framework of the peace deal. It's not completely set up. Um, but what's interesting about the abomination of desolation, it's so abomination would be something that you do that God doesn't like, that, and then it says of desolation that is going to cause desolation. So if Biden makes this peace deal with Saudi Arabia, they're going to try to pressure Israel to give the land to the Palestinians, which we know when you give land to the Palestinians, they just set up a terrorist state on the border of Israel. It's just not a good deal. Okay. So if this peace deal is allowed to unfold, it's just going to cause more desolation for Israel. Okay. But then we know that God says, I'm going to cut the time short, so that, in order to save people. Okay. So God probably knows that if he continues to allow time to, continue as it is right now, that there's just going to be more and more desolation for Israel. Okay. With this peace deal with Saudi Arabia. It's one of those things where they think they're making peace, but there is no peace. Okay. So God has to put an end to that. Okay. Um, um, but it's interesting that God says, how blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. So we want to wait. Okay. Because the 1335 days could connect to, the coming of the Messiah. But then it says, verse 13, it says, but as for you, go to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise for your allotted portion at the end of the age. There, I think God could be talking to, like, his followers or the Messiah, like Daniel being a messianic type figure, is what I'm thinking there. So, definitely, I definitely see prophecy being fulfilled. What's interesting with the 1335 is that 1335 days after the deal of the century takes us to 9/23/23, which is kind of interesting, which is the day before Yom Kippur Eve. Okay. But I'm also wondering if it could also be referring to 9/15/23, because it's 3 years after the peace signings. Remember I said that the peace signings that Trump had on 9/15/2020 was on the day 1335 of his presidency. Okay. So it could actually be a prophetical picture pointing to 9/15, which was really interesting about 9/15/23 is that that's Rosh Hashanah Eve, which is like New Year's Eve. Okay. On the Jewish calendar. Okay. So we just need to wait, hang on until New Year's Eve. Okay. And then I think it's going to be fun for God's people on New Year's Eve, I think, if that's the day we're needing to wait. But really, whatever, just wait, because we're so close to the Messiah coming, so just wait and hang in there. Okay. So, I mean, now that we're at the day 1290, I don't know how quickly then, I think at the most, if I had to guess, well, so, like I said, there's 7 threes, connected to 1290. I think the most we'd have to wait is like 33 days to, at the most. But I think we could almost see something happen like in 3 days. Okay. And so I'm counting August 9th as a day, like 9, 10, 11. Okay. As the 3 days. Okay. And so maybe like Friday night we could see something happen. Okay. I mean, so I said I've been looking at this August 11th date. Okay. And I think I have it on another screen, though. We'll talk about it. Okay. So another look at 1335 is that, okay, what if one connects to the deal of the century? What if one of the threes connects to the 3 indictments of Trump? And the reason why I'm thinking that is, like, if you connect it to the story of the cupbearer and the baker in Genesis like Genesis 40 or Genesis 39, that, so the cupbearer has the dream about the 3 branches of vine, and when Joseph interprets the dream, he says 3 branches are 3 days. Okay. So 3 days could connect to the three. Okay, so I really think like Trump with, as I kind of think the body of Christ connects to the Jewish people and the blood of Christ connects to the Christians. And so with, so the cupbearer I think connects to America, or like, actually that's funny now because, well, I mean, it connects to America. Okay. And so, but the cupbearer really is a picture of the one who's carrying the cup of judgment. Okay. And so it's Genesis 40. Okay. And okay, so, but what we see with the 3 branches of vine, okay, is that we're seeing, let's see, in my dream, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. And as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. So, what we have is the 3 branches of the vine are causing the grapes to grow. So, I connect the grapes to be like the grapes of wrath. Okay. I mean, I think the buds, the blossoms, and the grapes are like connect to the 3 groups of people. Okay. And so the grapes, I think, are the grapes of wrath. Okay. Like Trump's people could be the grapes, Biden's people could be the buds, the blossoms could connect to Messiah's people. Okay. The other thing that's interesting though about the these 3 branches of the vine, it could also connect to the 3 readings of the reasonableness bill, because it's the same thing. It's causing the grapes, it's causing the opposition to grow in anger in Israel. Okay. So similar, sometimes I think sometimes with prophecy there's, dual fulfillment. Okay. But 3 could be the 3 years under COVID. I'm not sure. Okay, but then the second 3 could connect to the 3 sins Biden committed against Israel. And so I think that's the 7/14/2022 paper, the maritime agreement, and then this new quote unquote Saudi peace deal, which they're calling it the mother of all Middle East peace deals. Okay. So I was thinking, just like I called the deal of the century, like the DOC, I could call this new peace deal the MOA, mother of all, and so what I think that, so the reason why I think that could connect to Biden's sins against Israel is we have the baker, has 3 baskets of bread on his head. Okay, so the bread could connect to the Jewish people. Okay, in the 3rd basket, the birds are eating the bread. Okay, so Saudi Arabia, in this deal, they want Israel to give the land to the Palestinians. So they're eating the bread. They're, going up against the Jewish people. Okay. There's also a connection to the Peter betraying Jesus 3 times. Okay. With that. Okay. But remember what happens with the, okay, so the cupbearer returns, he returns to his office, and then he puts Pharaoh's cup into his hand. So, the cupbearer returns to office and then gives the cup of judgment into Pharaoh's hand. Okay, so I think that could be Trump, that God allows him to return to his office so that he could bring judgment against Biden, because we're seeing that Biden's at his fullness of sins. Okay, I mean, not that Trump isn't, but just the way God's doing things, God's going to allow Trump to return so that he could bring judgment against Biden and his followers. Okay. And then, but then what happened? Because then what we read about with the chief baker, and so think about like the baker is like they're baking things up, they're cooking things up, okay? And so, Biden has baked up these agreements, or deals. He's been cooking up these deals, um, to bake the bread in Israel, to, um, and so then it says, okay, um, Joseph says, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. And then it says, thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. And so, I think what we're going to see is, because Biden has this 3rd basket on his head and the birds are eating the bread, that because if you divide Israel, you're going to be divided, is basically the deal. So, and then in this story, it's like on the 3rd day. Okay. And it's interesting that it says Pharaoh's birthday, because remember I said that Biden's Hebrew birthday is 9/11 or 11/9, either one. I don't remember which. It's probably 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar. So then with the number 5, I think that connects to the dividing of time. Okay. So that's what I'm wondering about 1, 3 through 5. I also did it this way, connecting to Esther with the book of Esther, because Esther says there was 30 days she was not summoned. That could connect to the 3 years of shutdown that we went into after the deal of the century under COVID, and then because Esther says, assemble all the Jews in Susa and fast for me for 3 days, night or day. So that could connect to the 3 readings of the reasonableness bill in Israel. And then it says Esther and her maidens will fast for 3 days, night or day in the same way. Okay. So that could connect to Trump's 3 indictments. Okay. So basically what we're seeing is that these 3 days of fasting is causing, kind of like these people to like grow up or bloom, or no, bloom's not a good way to say, but just the fullness of, they're growing up in the grapes of wrath. Okay. And then we have 5 is the dividing of time. So we have Esther on the 3rd day. She risked her life to go into the king, which is not according to law. So we see Esther being like the lawless one. Okay. So that could be, Trump grabbing the power, even though it's not according to law. Okay. So we read about the 2 witnesses, Revelation 11. It says, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. Okay, so Biden was declared the winner on 11/7. And their dead bodies in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. Those from the people, tribes, tongues, and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. Okay, so the city, okay, so a lot of times I connect the city to Biden too, okay? And so the city is like called Sodom and Egypt, okay? Where also their Lord was crucified. I mean, that kind of goes back to, Obama's presidency, where he really crucified the Christians, during his presidency. And then it's interesting because it's Revelation 11:9 says, those from the people, tribes, and tongues and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. Okay. What's interesting is that I think, like, looking at the dead bodies for 3.5 days could be Trump's 3 indictments, which is all leading to the 0.5 day, which is the dividing of time. And then it says, those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another because these 2 prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. Okay, so what we have is the left rejoicing over all of Trump's indictments. Okay, that is definitely happening. If you listen to any of the left's videos talking about Trump's indictments, they're all happy. Okay, so then verse 11 says, after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God came into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who were watching them. Okay, so they stood on their feet. So that means we are now at the feet of Daniel's statue. Okay. So man of lawlessness, like I said, connects to Trump. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed, either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord is come. Okay, so what you want to make sure is that these peace, quote unquote, signs of Trump and Biden don't cause you, to lose your faith in Jesus. Okay. And also the lies from the false prophets connected to these people. Okay. Especially, I don't really know much about who would be like Biden's false prophets, except maybe the media, because they definitely talk him up and talk about how great he is as president. But I know I'm a lot more familiar with the false prophets connected to Trump, and how they talk about he was sent from God and all that stuff. So then it says, let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. Okay. So the coming of our Lord Jesus is not, okay, we got to wait until the apostasy happens first and the man of lawlessness is revealed. Okay, well, I definitely think the apostasy, first we had the falling away during the time of Obama, but then we had Trump's peeps falling away during the time of Trump and going after Trump. Okay. And then, so the man of lawlessness being revealed, the son of destruction, would be Trump. And what else does it say about him? Who opposes and exalts himself above every so called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? Okay, so so I mean, I think we saw that happening while he was president, but we're definitely gonna, like, I think, when Trump returns, he's definitely, gonna take his seat in the temple and display himself as being God. Okay, and so he's gonna act like the savior of America. Okay, so that's what I think is coming up. And I guess there's more, and it says, and you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and is bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, without power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. Okay, so who restrains Trump now? Okay, well, really what's restraining him now is God is waiting for the fullness of Biden's sins. Okay, because then it says, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. So Biden's already the Biden and the left are already being lawless. Okay, they've been, doing their lawless stuff all during the time of his presidency. But at some point, and so then he's been able to restrain, Trump to an extent, but Biden's only gonna be allowed to restrain him until he is taken out of the way. Okay, so Biden is restraining Trump right now until God chooses to bring judgment on Biden. Okay, then that lawless one will be revealed. So I guess if you didn't know by now that Trump is the lawless one, you will when he's revealed. The eighth king will be revealed. And then it says the Lord's going to slay him with the breath of his mouth and bring an end by the appearance of his coming. So, Jesus, so Trump's going to deal with Biden. Let's see. Trump's going to deal with Biden, and then Jesus is going to come and deal with Trump. Okay. So that's what I think about that. So I wanted to point out that, okay, so we have this whole story in Numbers 13 about the spies. Okay. The bad report of the spies. They sent 12 people to spy out the land. 10 had a bad report. 2 still had faith. Okay. And so they came back and they said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Okay, so what I think is we're seeing the bad reports of Trump and QAnon, okay? That are really similar to the bad report of the spies, okay? Because they're saying the deep state is in America and they're coming after you. Trump definitely says that, so they're getting bad reports from Trump. For the longest time, they got bad reports from QAnon, okay, about this whole conspiracy theories about the deep state and how they were killing children for blood and or pedophiles or whatever the whole story is. Okay, nothing new under the sun. We had stories in the past, back in history, that always painted the Jewish people in a bad light. And so now it's just they're kind of focused on the left, saying they're the deep state. Because there's Pizzagate where the Clintons, had some pedophile thing under a pizza restaurant. I don't know, something like that. And so that was all kind of coming. They were already following all that before Trump even became president. And then when Trump became president, he repeated some of these conspiracy theories. So, he was able to gain all the QAnon believers as his followers, and so then it says Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb, who's one of the 2 that has faith, quieted the people before Moses and said, "We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it." But the men who had gone up with them said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us." So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone, in spying it out, is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people who we saw in it are men of great size. There we also saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim. And we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." So they are the people that say, there's giants in the land. We're grasshoppers. Okay, so a bad report. Okay, so basically, it's a bad report about America. We saw with, Trump's lies about the election, it was a bad report about America. It's you can't trust your elections. It was a stolen election. But it was all lies of Trump. Okay. A bad report about the election. And so it was causing people, to just think poorly about America. Okay. We already saw that with Obama, that he had a bad report about the land. Okay. And actually for him, it was the Christians are in power and, they're taking over and, causing all this bad stuff to happen. That was kind of the bad reports that were going around when Obama was president. Well, now it's Trump, with the bad reports about the people on the left. And then like the bad report about the immigrants, that they're all terrorists and rapists, and um, so that's what's going on right now in America. And so it's causing people to, so they end up, they're losing their faith. They're not waiting for Jesus. Like, first of all, they're losing their faith in God um because of these bad reports. When you just need to go, okay, yeah, it might be bad, but God's got it under control. Okay. And that we just need to wait on God to fix the situation. That's, if you have faith in God and Jesus, that should be your belief system. Okay. But they're not, they're at the point where these bad reports are going to cause them to try to take matters into their own hands. Okay. And then we see the exact same thing happen in Israel. Okay, so the left in Israel is also given a bad report about the current government in Israel. Okay, and so that's why there's been these weekly protests for like I think we're up to like 31 or 32 weeks of protests in Israel. Okay, against the government. Okay, and they're all kind of bent out of shape. The thing is, nowadays, with the government on the left and the government on the right, the new one comes in and undoes what the previous one did. You don't need to get all bent out of shape, because when your people get in power, you could just undo what they did. But people are getting really bent out of shape in Israel because of, it doesn't help that Netanyahu is just pushing through his, reform stuff and not really listening. Not listening to the other side. But it doesn't mean you should get all bent out of shape. And plus too, if we read the Bible, we'll know that, um, before Jesus comes, we're gonna have bad leaders. Okay. But it doesn't mean we lose our faith. We just wait for God to take care of it all. So that's what's going on there. And then also too, if you look up Odious in the Bible, there's this whole story in Exodus where, okay, the king of Egypt said to Moses and Aaron, "Why do you draw the people away from their work? Get back to your labors." Again, Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now many, and you would have them cease from their labors." So the same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters over the people and their foremen, saying, "You are no longer to give the people straw to make brick as previously. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." So the people scattered through all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The taskmasters pressed them, saying, "Complete your work quota, your daily amount, just as when you had straw." The foremen of the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, because they were told, "You must not reduce your daily amount of bricks." When they left Pharaoh's presence, they met Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them. They said to them, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you, for you have made us odious in Pharaoh's sight and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us." So when I read these verses, I'm like, this is definitely what is happening right now in Israel. Okay, so Moses and Aaron could connect to Gans and Lapid in Israel that are drawing the people in Israel away from their work. Okay, because of the bad report, they're actually getting, the people in the left in Israel are causing people to spend their time protesting, and the reservists in Israel are not reporting to their military posts as a way of protesting Netanyahu's judicial reforms. So they're keeping them away from their labors. Okay. And then it says, okay, the foremen of the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, because they were told, "You must not reduce your daily amount of bricks." Okay. So the military is realizing that they can't, reduce their, that they still need to, continue to do what they do, or they'll be in trouble, and so, I think I read that and said, get back to your military post, even if there isn't any compromise in the reasonableness bill. But the people that lead the military are seeing that they're in trouble, because they still need to be able to protect themselves against their enemies. Okay. Well, then it says, um, so when the people left Pharaoh's presence, they met Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them, and they said to them, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you, for you have made us odious in Pharaoh's sight and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us." Okay, so because Netanyahu was insistent in pushing his reforms through, the protests are continuing and the country looks weak to their enemies. Iran or Hezbollah might take advantage of this and attack Israel. Okay, um, so that's what's going on in Israel. And actually, earlier when I was reading, I can't remember what I was reading, but it reminded me too about how it says, "You are no longer to give the people straw to make brick as previously. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." So, what I see there in the story about how they take straw away from the people is that, so there's a verse that connects, let me think, like the word of God is like grain, and then stuff that's not the word of God is like straw. So I can't remember exactly how that goes, but Trump's words would be like straw. Okay, it's not grain that the Messiah brings. Okay, well, so at some point they're gonna say, well, see, and this is why what's gonna happen tomorrow is really interesting, because are they gonna say, "Okay, Trump, you have to be quiet," and so people are gonna get all bent out of shape because they won't have Trump's words of straw to listen to anymore. Okay. Um, so that's going to be interesting to see. Um, so the other odious story relates to when Dinah, one of the sister of the 12 brothers, went out to the land. Okay. Um, and that says, okay, so it's interesting with that one is there's a son and there's a father. Okay, well, so that kind of connects to Saudi Arabia, because you have the father is in charge of Saudi Arabia, but the son wants to make a deal with America. Okay, so it says, Hamar spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter." So that's Saudi Arabia wanting to make a deal with America. And it says, "Please give her to him in marriage. Intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourself." So Saudi Arabia wants to trade with America. They want America's military weapons and um, uh, information, intelligence, and they want America to help them get together a nuclear, set up a nuclear system. I don't know what you call it, infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. So they're saying, intermarry with us, give your daughters to us, take your daughters for ourselves, then you should live with us, and the land shall be open for you. Before you live and trade in it and acquire property in it. And so then it says, Hamar and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their cities, saying, "The men are friendly with us, therefore let them live in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. Only on this condition will the men consent to us to live with us, to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised." So what we have is Biden and Jake Sullivan are speaking to the Israelis, going, "Hey, let's make this deal with Saudi Arabia, and then, we can trade with them." There's this train deal that Netanyahu wants to get this train going from Israel up to Saudi Arabia, so they might be able to convince Netanyahu to get in this deal. If they say, "Hey, you can, have your train going up to Saudi Arabia," because, Netanyahu's all about the dollar signs. Okay. But then it says, one of the conditions of this peace deal is giving some of the land to the Palestinians. Okay. So that's going to be circumcising the males. It's going to be chopping up Israel. Okay. Um, and then it says, will not their livestock and their property and their animals be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will live with us. Okay, but then it says, now it came about on the third day when they were in pain, that two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came upon the city unawares and killed every male. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the edge of the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went forth. Jacob's sons came upon the slain and looted the city because they had defiled their sister. So this is the thing that makes prophecy a little hard to see, is that it switches in the story. So then in this part of the story, when it talks about the third day when they were in pain, Simeon and Levi each took his sword and came upon the city. Now I think we're switching to America, and Trump and his followers are going to come and attack in America. Okay. And so it's interesting that it says the third day when they're in pain. That could go back to the story where now they won't have straw to listen to Trump anymore. Okay. That they're going to, try to shut up Trump. And that's going to cause them pain. So that then Trump's followers are going to take out their swords and start fighting. So then it says, then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And my men being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I will be destroyed, I and my household. So then this verse, I think, switches back to Israel, where Simeon and Levi could be Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir, or I'm not really sure who in his government would be like the second guy. But it's, it says because of Netanyahu forcing through the reasonableness bill, then people, the reservists didn't want to report to duty, so then it's making their military men few in number. And so it's going to cause the Canaanites and the Perizzites, which could be Iran and Hezbollah, to gather together against Israel and attack them and destroy them. Okay. And then we read about the covenant for 1 week in Daniel 9. Okay, so we know at 70 years of Israel was when the embassy was moved. But then it goes on and says, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So we know at 70 weeks that Netanyahu and Trump lost their power at 70 weeks after the DOC. There definitely has to be a second fulfillment of the 70 weeks to fulfill all this other stuff, to make an end to sin and make atonement for iniquity. But I guess the fact that they lost power was a way of atonement. Okay. And then it says, so you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, that would be the deal of the century, until Messiah the Prince, there would be 7 weeks. So 7 weeks after the deal of the century, the shutdown started. So there would be 7 weeks and there'd be 62 weeks. So we know that Biden was in power on day 62. And then it says it will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. So we know that Biden was able to rebuild Obama's kingdom when he came back in power. So with plaza and moat, you have the moat that kind of connects to the beast from the sea. But then the 62 weeks, this being built again also too could be a picture of Netanyahu returning to power. Because then it says even in times of distress, so that definitely connects to Netanyahu returning to power. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So after 62 weeks, the anointed one cut off at 62 is Trump losing power when Biden comes into power. And then it says the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. So Biden destroys America and Israel. And its end will come with the flood, because Biden is the beast from the sea. And then even to the end, there'll be war. We've had this war going on with Russia and Ukraine. it says desolations are determined, definitely lots of weather desolations. Um, and then it says, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. Okay, so this could be the people waiting for the Supreme Court. The covenant for 1 week, because Netanyahu did kind of say this when he well, actually, what Netanyahu said when he passed his reasonableness bill, like, I guess they actually had a compromise on the table, but he kind of rejected it. He pushed through what he wanted, and then he kind of made this promise to them, like, oh, when we come back after our break, because right now the government's on a break, um, um, then we'll look at this and try to make it more fair or whatever is what Netanyahu promised. So he made a promise with them, but then it says in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offerings. So the problem with this promise is that in the meantime, that Iran or Hezbollah could come attack Israel, so that there isn't time to wait to try to do this, compromise. But it also could be the people waiting for the Supreme Court to shoot down Netanyahu's bill after 7 weeks, because that's the other thing too that they're waiting for in Israel. But then it says, on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. So Iran's going to take advantage of the division in Israel. But it's also could mean Trump comes soon after Biden sets up his peace deal with Saudi Arabia. Even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So, could be dual fulfillment. Iran taking advantage of the division in Israel. Trump, coming after Biden's abomination. And so they'll come until they cause a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. And so then they are going to cause destruction until Jesus comes and puts an end to their destruction. Okay, peace and safety. So now as to the times and epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you, but you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with a child, and they will not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief. But you are all sons of light and sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. So while they're saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly. So they're definitely, peace and safety is so strong in this Saudi Arabia deal, because they're saying it's the mother of all Middle East peace deals, and they're just really saying it's the greatest thing, and it's, really going to help Biden's legacy, and blah, 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 blah. What's interesting, it says destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman with child. Okay, so the woman with child could be a picture of Trump's followers with Trump, okay? And the labor pains are like his indictments, okay? But then it says, we're not in darkness, that the day would overtake us like a thief, okay? Because we're following Jesus, not Trump, okay? But we know that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. So what I think is that Jesus comes the same time that Trump comes, okay? And the Jewish people talk about that they believe that Messiah's gonna come, like just as the temple is set ablaze, then Messiah comes, or something like that. I don't know if I have that quote somewhere. Oh, I can't find it. So anyways, but that's what the Jewish people think, is like, just as destruction comes is the same time when the Messiah is coming. Okay. So when is that going to happen? So sudden destruction, it could be within the next couple of days. Okay. So potential dates: April 11th is the third day after the peace announcement, if you count 9, 10, 11. Okay. Pharaoh's birthday. Okay, I talked about this. Biden's birthday is 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar, and so August 11th is 9 months, 11 days after 11/1/2022, which was the election in Israel. It's also the day that the dog's days of summer end. So it's a possible 9/11 day. Okay, but it's an 8/11 day, but it's a possible 9/11 day. I mean, so I don't really know if it'll be that quick. But see, I'm kind of wondering, because like September 11th is a 9/11, like it's a really strong 9/11 day. It is the 9/11 day. But if Jesus is coming like a thief in the night, would he come on some date that's so obvious, like 9/11? I'm not sure, you know. But September 11th is 9 months, 11 days after 12/1/2022, which is when Netanyahu got in power. So that's why that's another potential date. We'll know like within 3 days, but there's so many 9/11 signs. So in my last video, I talked about the 9/11 signs with the Titan implosion. Okay, Ocean Gate Expeditions is 9/11. The debris was recovered on June 28th, which was the 11th day after June 18. June 28th is Tammuz 9, so there's 9/11 there. There was this unconfirmed transcript that maybe it imploded at 9:47, which would be 9/11. You could see that in my last video. Joe Biden's Hebrew birthday conversion is 9/11. Trump was the 45th president, which is 4 plus 5 equals 9. If he returns, he will be the 47th president, which is 4 plus 7 equals 11. So you got 9/11 with that. Okay, so Herzog is the 11th president of Israel. And then Netanyahu, they're saying that he's the 9th prime minister of Israel, but he's really like the 20th or the 21st. I got kind of lost when I was trying to count. But since the first time he was prime minister, he was the 9th prime minister. They just, even when he returns, they still say he's the 9th prime minister of Israel. So you got the 9/11 numbers there, So remember in Back to the Future, there was this 9/11 hidden clues. Okay. So it was called the Twin Pines Mall. When we turn it upside down, it says 9/11. And then, but there's this hidden two, like 1335 is also hidden in there too. So Marty returns to the mall at 1:33 a.m., which, now it's like 1:33 a.m. because if 1 is the deal of the century and 3, there's the 3 indictments and the 3 things that Biden did. So, now, we're at the 1:33 time frame. The mall is now called the Lone Pine Mall, which means one of the pines could be falling. Marty returns to the mall right when Doc is being shot by the Libyans. Twin Pines could connect to Christmas. 1335 connects to Hanukkah. The Lone Pine. So Marty is the 5. In this picture, we see the 133, and then Marty's walking by the sign. It might be hard to see in this picture, but he's the 5 because there's 5 letters in Marty, 5 letters in McFly. That could connect to the 5 foolish virgins and the 5 wise virgins in the scripture when Jesus comes. Doc Brown adds up to 8. Doc could be Trump. They're trying to kill Doc or Trump, but he ends up living. Okay, so that could be like a picture of his indictments. They're trying to indict him, but then he ends up living. Okay. But then at the same time, Marty shows up which is, he's got 5, which could connect to Jesus. Okay, so like Marty shows up to try to save the day. Okay. In the Trump Tower, another 9/11 picture, the blaze broke out on the 50th floor. Okay, so that connects to the dividing of time. Okay, the 0.5. It happened on Saturday, April 7th, 2018, which is 11 plus 11, which adds up to 22. It happened on Nissan 22. So we have that 22 number, which is the 8th, connects to the 8th, like the 8th king. Okay, so Trump Tower, he could be the 8th king. It's interesting that 6 firefighters were injured because 6 connects to Trump too. On 9/11, what's very interesting, I just saw this, 2001, add that up. So you have 9/11 adds up to 20, 2001 adds up to 3. So that adds up to 23. Okay, so we're in the year 2023. Okay, is that a sign that God was giving us in 9/11? Okay, but 23 adds up to 5 too. So is the dividing of time going to happen in 2023? So 9 means good, or 9 months of pregnancy. You have the thing about 6 versus 9. 9 is the heavenly number, 6 is the worldly number. 11 means judgment or hand of God. I mean, 9/11 could be like Jesus on the cross with the 2 thieves, where Jesus is the 9, the heavenly, with the 2 thieves, the one on one side, the one on the other side, and they're under judgment. The 2 thieves are under judgment. Okay. 9/11 2023 would be 22 years. We have the North Tower and the South Tower, which connects to the civil war in Israel. You have the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. We saw on 9/11, we saw planes hitting towers. Okay, that could connect to the 9th of Ab on 7/27. Okay, so we've had the plane hitting the towers. Okay, Biden's son's been, or charged, and Trump's been charged. So now we're waiting for the towers to fall. There's kind of this thing on 9/11, this reversal that happens with the towers falling, because the one tower gets hit and then the other tower gets hit with the plane, but then the way they fall, it's not the same order. So there's a reversal with the towers falling. Okay, so basically I think what it means is that when the towers fall, there's a reversal of who's in power. Okay. Okay, so are we in the last days? Okay, so in America, they're closing in on Trump. Okay, I think he's the insurrectionist. Okay, when Jesus was being crucified, they wanted them, the crowd wanted the chief priest to release Barabbas, who is the insurrection, instead of Jesus. Okay, and so that would be a picture of Trump's followers. Okay, they want Trump released. Okay, and they don't care if Jesus gets crucified in the process. Okay, I think Trump is the 4th beast, exceedingly dreadful, which with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. So you see that feet there again. And the meaning of the 10 horns would be the 10 spies that don't have faith. Okay. And then Donald Trump Jr. was roasted for claiming it will be the end of civilization if Daddy Donald is indicted for January 6th insurrection. I mean, he's kind of delusional, but he's also kind of being prophetical in what he said. Okay. I talked about that in my last video. And then many last days signs. The weather signs they blame on climate change, but God says, "For this time I will send all my plagues on you and your servants and your people, so that you may know there is no one like me in all the earth." And then, so God is sending all these signs through the weather, but people are blaming it on climate change, so they're not even knowing what God's trying to say. Okay, God's trying to get our attention in these last days. Okay. And then So I wonder, will God shorten the days and not make us wait till September 11th? I mean, November 9th is also a type of 9/11. It's 11/9. But one of the things is in Proverbs 10, I saw this in a video. It says, "He who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully." So they were saying in this video that I watched, they said that Jesus is the wise son who gathers in summer. Um, so, it is possible we could see this sooner rather than later, because Jesus is going to come and gather his people in the summertime. And then I said, don't go either left or right. So you shall observe to do just as the Lord your God commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right or to the left. There's thieves on both sides of Jesus. There's problems with the right's belief. There's problems with the left's belief. Okay, don't go either way. Just follow Jesus. Follow his word. Okay. And then if we see the burning on the right and the burning on the left, we are out of time. Or you want to be in the middle with Jesus, who's not a part of time. Like this. We have the Sea of Biden on the left, Sea of Trump on the right. We want to be on the dry land with Messiah in the middle where there's no lies. Okay, the great city was split into 3 parts and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God. That would be Biden, to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. That's the cup that Trump's going to put into Biden's hand, okay? God's wrath, okay? Okay, so that's what I think. This is it, 1290 days, okay? So Jesus has got to be right at the door, I mean, this just has to be, like I said, either 3 days or 33 days. I just really can't picture it going past. I definitely don't think maybe it would go past the Jewish holidays, because the reason why I think it could be earlier than later is that I think we might need to do some purifying to get ready for the Jewish holidays. Okay. And so like the woman was purified for like 33 days. Okay. And so, so it's possible that Jesus could come back sooner and get us purified before the Jewish holidays, especially before Yom Kippur. Okay. So anyway, so that's why I'm thinking, it could be shorter rather than later. Okay. But if not, then, like I said, either September 11th, is before the Jewish holidays. Then you got Rosh Hashanah coming up, and then Yom Kippur. So anyways, so hang in there. Thanks so much for listening. It's a lot of information, but I hope you see, really my point is to see we have been fulfilling prophecy all along. Okay. And so, we got to be near the end. Okay. We're at the feet. So hang in there, look up, your redemption draws nigh. God bless. I know times are really hard right now. But, be encouraged. Okay. Hang in there. Wait for Jesus. Don't follow Trump. Don't follow Biden. They're false prophets. They're false messiahs. Wait for Jesus, the true Messiah. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.